all starts with a patient. At the Global Liver Institute, we believe it all starts with a patient. So what happens when a patient, a liver patient no less, one of the 500 million people living with conditions that often go undiagnosed, untreated, or misdiagnosed, mistreated, and stigmatized, brings the challenges of liver patients front and center? And what happens when a patient then leads a discussion with world experts in policy, research, clinical care, and wellness on ways to overcome these challenges? Let's find out today on GLI Live. Hello and welcome. My name is Donna Cryer. I'm the CEO of the Global Liver Institute, and I have the great privilege of being your host for this episode of GLI Live. This is a very special series that we're doing during Women's History Month, Women's Health Month, and I have quite selfishly scheduled the women I most admire and look up to and have learned from throughout my career to share with you. And so today we have the inestimable Mary Woolley, the president and CEO of ResearchAmerica. Welcome, Mary.
Oh, Donna, thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to see you and talk with you today.
One of the organizations that no matter the organization I'm with, no matter the company I'm involved with, the first thing I do or recommend is to become a member of Research America, because your mission and what you have been able to achieve and highlight for the importance of research, all types of research, for all of us patients across the country is so important. So can you tell us about Research America?
Absolutely. So thank you for the recommendation you just made. We welcome members. We're a nonprofit alliance of stakeholders in research for health, which is about the future of health. It's based on research and putting the evidence drawn from that research to work to find the solutions to what ails us. So we're composed of academic institutions, patient organizations, industry that works in the health research space, and scientific and clinical societies, and a smattering of others from the foundation world and individuals, all committed to our mission of making research for health a much higher national priority. We can get there. It sometimes surprises people, Donna, that we're not there already.
Right.
You know, there's so many. We're all patients, you know, and we have patients suffering with sometimes very severe conditions and illnesses within our own family, among our friends. And it comes as a surprise to people that since most of the government funding for medical research comes from the NIH, that the NIH is not adequately powered up, meaning it doesn't have enough money to fund more than approximately a fifth of the proposals that it receives every year from scientists who are determined to make a difference for society. So we're leaving all of those good ideas on the cutting room floor. And that's not getting us to the health status we want for all of us individually, for our family and friends, for our nation and for the world. It's not getting us there fast enough. So
I think
that's
that
where advocates come in. Is just
I absolutely think that's one of the things that certainly as we are helping people make the transition from patient to patient advocate, and certainly sharing with the patient advocacy leaders that we have as part of our different GLI councils, that we put a segment of our time to that long-term thinking. So yes, there are things that we are working on to help patients access the cures and treatments of today, but we want to make sure that they have cures and treatments and physicians tomorrow. And so looking at that long-term investment
Mhm.
in funding
Mhm.
the research position, so that young researchers can say, oh, there will be enough money to fund my ideas, fund my research. It's something, worth pursuing. It takes a very long-term view. And that's why I really, appreciate the role that Research America, takes in making sure that all of us are really thinking about that long-term view, that long-term investment, to make sure that there is a sustainable process.
Thank you, Donna, and for amplifying that important message. I would add that there's another piece of it, which is although we as advocates always talk about the importance of leading with your own story, because that's where your passion is, and that's how you engage someone. But to also add to it the importance of adequately supporting all other kinds of research for health, because we're all in it together. And it's there's a scientific reason for that. Sometimes a discovery in heart disease might benefit a liver program, a liver research program, or you can think of many examples here. But the last thing we want is to create the impression that we have a fixed pie and we're going to fight over the biggest piece. That's not the point. We have a very wealthy nation. We could be committing many more dollars to research for health. Right now, we only spend 5 to 6 cents of every health dollar on research. And that's from all sources, not only National Institutes of Health, but importantly, the private sector as well, business and industry, universities, others, philanthropy. 5 or 6 cents as what a family or an individual might put aside for the future, investing in their own future, their children's education, their own retirement. That isn't enough. Any financial planner would tell you that. We need to increase that. And we need to increase it as a percentage of our GDP as well. Other nations are doing so, reading from a playbook, a US playbook that was established generations ago, that has been kind of taken for granted by sometimes policymakers and often the public, because we assume that we're doing everything that could be done. And it's having a light bulb go on, collectively saying, no, we're not, but let's change that. We can change it.
So, Mary, you are uniquely articulate on these issues. How did you come to be in this position? Tell us a little bit about your career and your path here.
Oh, thanks. Well, nobody, as a child, nobody I've ever met, said, I always really wanted to be an advocate for anything, actually, for medical research or anything else. But I was an advocate, a small a, as a child. I was very interested in the political world and engaged in it. I met President Kennedy when he was running for office. Was very inspired. My family was quite political. I thought I would go to law school and serve the public's interest via that route. And you have done just that, Donna, law school. But I did not go to law school. Actually, real life intervened. When I was an undergraduate, I was in a terrible car accident. I was the only survivor. And it took a long time for me to be put back together. But I was put back together. And I had a new profound appreciation of the importance of the research that was backing the sometimes experimental treatments and programs that I was involved in at the time. I won't go into a lot of detail. But the long and short of that is after I got a master's degree, I took a job in a research institute. And believe me, I don't have any science background per se, educationally speaking. But I got engaged in a very big way and ended up as the CEO of that institute, and was the CEO for several years before being recruited to Research America, where
Mhm.
I was able to put together my political, and I had ongoing political interest,
Mhm.
and my science. By then I did know a bit about science, and my passion for advocacy. I could put
Mhm.
those pieces together in a new organization, Research America. So that was 3 decades ago.
It is, one of the, pillars of healthcare in DC, for me. And, but I think it is because it's always reinventing itself. You're always reinventing the organization. I always know when I go to one of your events or now, webinars, I am hearing the top person, the most cutting edge information. And so how do you keep it fresh and interesting, particularly in a public that seems to not be as interested in science and research as it once was, or has at least a different perspective and relationship with research and science.
Right. Well, a lot of it, Donna, it's a great question. Thank you. A lot of it is about being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that before we came along and started commissioning public opinion surveys,
Mm-hmm.
the science community generally felt that communicating with others was the same thing as communicating with their peers. You conduct your research and then you report it out,
Mm-hmm.
and your peers discuss it with you and so forth. You get it published, and
Mm-hmm.
throw it over some kind of fence.
Mm-hmm.
The practicing health professionals, and
Mm-hmm.
never think about it again. Now, it's a little harsh, but in fact, the science community, the research community, was not paying attention to what the ultimate consumer, and by the way, supporter of that
Mm-hmm.
research through tax dollars or through consumer dollars,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't meeting their needs necessarily, didn't even know what they were, those needs, and often some cases easier
Mm-hmm.
than others, and so and didn't know what their questions were,
Mm-hmm.
or made some unfortunate assumptions that even in the seemingly obvious ways, like when you say NIH
Mm-hmm.
to a person in your extended family, do they know what you're talking about? Do they know that's the taxpayer-supported National Institutes of Health,
Mm-hmm.
funds medical research on every disease and disability, plus basic science,
Right.
at institutions in every state in this country? Do they know that? No, they do not know that. But you can say that, and making that link to you, this is yours, you're the boss, I work for you. Where some of the insights that we put to work early on at Research America, because things change, because people's attitudes change,
Mm-hmm.
external shock, terrible events happen, the HIV/AIDS crisis, which actually began before Research America was started, but it was still going on.
Mm-hmm.
The early days of Research America also included finally making sure that women could participate in NIH clinical trials. I mean, astonishingly, that wasn't true until the 1990s. So things have changed, and sometimes they're crisis-driven. COVID, bringing us up to the present, is an example of that. There is more attention to science now, but the atmosphere is different. We have social media. We have surround sound, if you will, on every topic all the time. We have misinformation. We've always had misinformation, but now it's all the time.
Right.
And hard sometimes for people to distinguish. But there's more attention to science now than there has been for a very long time. And there's good and bad things about that. And we work hard, and that's what's so engaging at the moment. We work hard to pivot from the bad to emphasize the good, and help the science community, patient advocacy community, understand how to work with the bad. Can I give you an example of that?
Please.
So often, too often, I hear leaders in the science community, the medical community, decry public skepticism about science. Well, this is superbly ironic because scientists are taught to be skeptical, to ask questions, to keep pushing for the how did you do that? What's that based on? Why should I believe you kind of thing. So we should embrace that when we hear it from someone who wasn't trained in science and say to them, sounds to me like you're being skeptical here. You have a skeptical attitude. That makes us partners here because scientists are skeptical. That's a value in science. So talk to me about what is on your mind when you're saying that you're skeptical, or similar words.
Right. Absolutely. I think that, also the fact that science evolves.
Yes.
So it's not that we're, pulling a bait and switch, but that, we've added to our knowledge and science evolves. And so being comfortable with that concept is very important to communicate to the public.
So well said, Donna. When we say a scientist says that here's you asked me a question, here's what the truth. Shouldn't do that at all. They should be talking about here's what we know today. And I'll tell you if and when that changes. And what that means is that we've got to, in the science community, we've got to get a lot better at communicating science as a process which serves the public interest. I think that's always really important.
Right.
And not as a product or a truth. So that involves changing the culture of science, and we're working in that area, working with science to try to make that change, especially in younger generations who are much more interested in engaging with the public and being responsive to the public. The public, as you know, and a leader in, should be involved. Patients should be involved at the beginning when we're talking about which research to, what research to do, how to do it, how to be effective in engaging patients if it's clinical research, and keeping patients engaged every step of the way.
Mary, I really appreciate you saying that. It was a strategic decision on GLI's part to not, at least at our earliest stages, which I feel like we're still in, to not be focused really on funding research, but on ensuring that there was research policy, government funding of research for NIH in particular, since liver research cuts across so many different institutes, whether National Cancer Institutes or NIDDK or NIAID, and many others is what we have been socializing our group to understand. And so there are so many different ways to support research, training patients to be able to help clinical trials become more patient-centric, increasing the diversity in clinical trials so that there is trust in trials in different communities. And so we often talk about, we do have a research, pillar of our work, but it doesn't look like what you might expect from a patient advocacy organization, because we felt in liver in particular, those other parts were so ignored while there was so much amazing research going on. We did cures for hepatitis C in the first year of the founding of the organization. But there weren't all the other parts to support ongoing research, policy, and funding. And so we wanted to be able to focus on that.
Which is so important, Donna, the work that GLI does, because I firmly believe that it's no one mission-driven kind of organization can do it all.
Right.
We've got to support each other, And all, I get back to that serving the public's interest, patient's interest, and that's a goal we all share. We get there from different directions, perhaps, but they're quite complementary and should be reinforced by each other. And we're very conscious of that. And I know you are too, and you just articulated it. So, that's what we've got to. And I am old enough to remember the times when different groups and interests actually did throw each other under the bus, and that is not a good thing.
No.
It doesn't work for anybody, doesn't meet anyone's needs in the long run, and it drives policymakers crazy, because they do see the big picture and they know there's trade-offs, and when people come in volunteering to throw some other interest under the bus, they know that this is, not where they want to be, because their constituents have all those interests.
Absolutely. Well, patients have all of those parts and may have more than one disease. I think perhaps because I do, that has informed our perspective. But I think it's definitely one of the hallmarks of how we do advocacy, where we're often swapping roles with our physician or medical society partners and saying, I'll talk about the importance of, a physician and researchers. You talk about the patient part, and then they'll be so confused. They'll have to, they'll have to say, yes, I'll take yours. And then also when we are, we've created, multi-disease platforms, certainly in our liver cancer work, bringing a variety of the drivers of liver cancer, which could involve groups with different types of viral hepatitis, obesity, a variety of groups coming together to all talk about liver cancer, or the series that we've done with our partners in renal health to understand the intersections of renal health or kidney health and liver health, and that has, I feel, made us closer and made our work sort of jointly supporting NIDDK easier, because we have a foundation of a lot of different activities and success in other areas that we can now look to as we do that work. And so that's exciting, I think, to put all those parts together and to break down the silos and counter the expectations that people have as a.
Right. I salute you for that, because I think too many people are fearful of getting outside of what we might call their silo, because they feel that there might be some loss involved there. And even, to be frank, power sharing will be required.
Right.
But, we've got to push through that. There's so much more power in working together. And among other things, it's just, it's a fair-minded approach instead of fear, one coming from fear. And it can help us in areas like health equity, ultimately, too, which I'm so glad is being straightforwardly addressed now, rather than a slogan.
Right.
We're beyond that, I hope, and are going to stay beyond that to really drive action to achieve it.
And we've had conversations about how to be transformational in terms of health equity in research, rather from the research workforce, to the outputs of research. And what traction, what change, what positive change have you seen occurring because of these new conversations or the new emphasis on them?
Yeah. Well, I have seen people go beyond, more and more say, we've got to stop diagnosing and fine tuning that diagnosis of what's wrong, and actually do something.
Right.
And folks are putting together alliances, coalitions to drive change, and talking about it a lot matters, and then holding each other to account. Okay, so what are you gonna do? I know our board very much feels that way at Research America. You know, tell us what you have in mind. What are you going to do?
Right.
What are you going to accomplish here? Even though our mission is not to achieve health equity, we do want it to happen, and we think that research can play a role, you know, in making sure it happens by leading with evidence-based steps forward in health equity. And in the research workforce, oh my gosh, you know, there's been way too many years of talking about it without actually taking steps forward. And a relatively new report called the NIH Vision and Framework, not a long academy length report, but very readable, weaves the importance of diversity throughout and makes some very specific recommendations to the NIH in that regard. And we can get you a link to that, or your listeners.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely.
Without, you know, going into a lot of detail right now. But there's a role for everybody. And it's not about hiring your equity officer. I mean, good to have them, or your diversity officer, nice to have. It's figuring out what's your role and who's going to hold you, or if you're the CEO, then is the board going to hold you accountable for change, you know, change that matters. Yeah.
Absolutely. You have a very unique board. It's one of the things that I've, you know, admired and watched, because I look to you in so many ways. So for the substance, certainly, of Research America, but also how you've grown your organization. And I think part of the secret sauce is a very unique and powerful board that you have. Tell me how tell us all how you construct your board and the unique composition that you have.
Right. Well, it's another thing that's been very deliberate about Research America, because when we started out, and to clarify, I wasn't there on day one, although I was an advisor, so I was around, you know. But when we started, our board consisted, as it does conceptually still, of various stakeholder representatives of various stakeholder groups who care about, deeply committed to making medical and health research a higher national priority. But they were almost all white men. So we, when I came on board, made some changes. I've long been a change agent in that way, wherever I've been. And so we're much closer now in terms of demographics. We're much closer to, it's not 50-50 men and women, but it's close. And we also have a very diverse, geographically, racial and ethnicity, less so on age. We still do a little older, perhaps, than some boards, but we're working on that. We're doing better.
That's okay. And there are a lot of us who are aging into that.
How do you define it? We do have and have not since the very beginning, but soon after, we have a number of former members of Congress and other former appointed officials, like the former head of the NIH, the former head of the FDA, others who have served in substantial appointed roles as well as elected roles. So that, combined with presidents of universities and deans and CEOs in industry and the CEOs of patient groups, et cetera, makes for quite a dynamic board. We're proud of it. We're also proud of our staff, of our team, fabulous people who I get to work with every day, Donna, and they make it hum.
It has been my privilege to work with them over the course of several years, and I can agree that they are fantastic, and I've taken tips on on the hiring and performance about the wonderful folks I see at Research America. I'm like, oh well, that's what effective looks like. So let me do things like that. So I've learned many lessons. Those you've taught me explicitly, and those I've just observed and sort of soaked up over the years. Trying to gain some wisdom by proxy. And I am really excited about the fact that I know amongst the audience of the show are several people who have worked for me and or whom I mentor or are building advocacy organizations for
Mm.
themselves. And so,
Mm.
you
That's
know,
wonderful.
paying it forward a little bit is a really I'm humbled to be able to do that. So if I can give them a little access to you, then I would have done my job as a good mentor.
Well, they're lucky to have had your support in it, from the beginning. And I agree that's a great part of anyone's career, if they're able to help the people who work for them go on to be their own superstar. So if I could say anything to anybody wanting to make a difference, a woman or otherwise, but especially say a woman, say be like Donna Cryer. Be resolute. Be resilient. Network. Meet more people. Keep them close, but also let them develop and bloom. Be positive all the time. Be a friend. Thank you, Donna, for all of this. Be like
Thank you,
Donna.
Mary. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. Until next time. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Join us weekly on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time for more episodes of GLI Live. Check out our website, globalliver.org, and follow us on social media to learn more about the Global Liver Institute and stay up to date with the latest in liver health. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.